Hallo iedereen, mijn naam is Johnny Verkeuringen, CEO bij Europese Goudstandaard, een Belgische dealer in fysiek goud en zilver, baren en munten. Vandaag hebben we opnieuw een hele speciale gast bij ons. We spreken vandaag met Chris Marcus van Arcadia Economics vanuit Amerika. Chris Marcus werkte in eerste instantie bij het wereldbekende Moody's, een bedrijf dat ratings geeft aan vooral obligaties van over heel de wereld. Daarna was hij 7 jaar een aandelen- en optiehandelaar op Wall Street, op de American Stock Exchange. In 2008 was hij verbaasd dat zo goed als niemand in zijn sector de financiële crisis had zien aankomen. Hij begon daarom de volgende jaren de weinige investeerders en mensen te bestuderen die de crisis wel hadden zien aankomen of voorspeld en hun geld op tijd hadden veiliggesteld en dat veranderde zijn leven compleet. In 2012, na ongeveer 10 jaar in de financiële markten en Wall Street gezeten te hebben, stapte hij op en verliet hij zijn job daar, omwille van de feiten die hij allemaal ontdekt had. Vanaf toen is zijn missie geworden markten bestuderen en ontleden tot op het bot en zijn informatie te verspreiden en delen met iedereen die het wil. Hij wil dat mensen, investeerders en beleggers weten wat er komt en de juiste informatie hebben voor het te laat is en niet nadat iets gebeurd is. Hij denkt dat we momenteel aan de vooravond staan van een spectaculaire periode in de financiële geschiedenis. Zijn YouTube-kanaal heeft momenteel meer dan 50.000 abonnees. Hij staat erom bekend in zijn onderzoek naar de juiste informatie de onderste steen boven te krijgen en spit alles uit tot in het kleinste detail. Zijn boek dat hij geschreven heeft, The Big Silver Short, is daar een mooi voorbeeld van. Er bestaat geen enkel boek in de wereld dat zo omvattend is als het over zilver of over de zilvermarkt gaat. Maar we gaan hem zelf aan het woord laten. Oké, welkom Mr. Chris Marcus. Can you tell us, or European viewers, a little bit who you are, what you are doing and what your experiences are?
Hoe gaat het, Johnny? Ik begrijp het niet, everything you say. Although, yes, I actually lived in the Netherlands for about a year. The first time I left the US in response to the Ponzi scheme economy we run here. So I remember a couple key phrases. And Johnny, am I correct? We are going to talk about some zilvergeld today?
Yes, we're going to talk about silver.
Cool. And then now that I'm done with my jokes, can you remind me the first question and we can dig in and I'll try to answer it for you.
Yeah, a little bit who you are, what you are doing and what your experiences are to our European viewers.
Sure. Well, my background, my misguided youth, I spent 11 years on Wall Street after college, rather eye-opening experience. I remember a couple of years into trading equity options on the floor of the American, then New York Stock Exchange. And as the subprime bubble was unraveling, it just seemed odd. Whereas on a trading floor, I just finished an MBA program and was thinking, wasn't I the guy theoretically trained to be able to see something like this in advance? I mean, we find out later that's not exactly what the Wall Street or business school apparatus is for. But I did find that anyone who had seen it, unlike Ben Bernanke or Hank Paulson or anyone at the Fed or in government, people who did see it actually all were talking about gold and silver. They were all talking about Austrian economics. And maybe we could simplify Austrian economics. Perhaps it's really, you could also call it first grade level common sense that is not diluted by Keynesian. I don't even know this Keynesian banker stuff. Johnny, maybe I never did, but I don't believe these are just a bunch of confused bozos that really think, well, you know, if we melted down the economy 15 years ago because we printed too much money, and if we just double down and triple down, that's going to fix it. I believe the way that these things get orchestrated is that, you know, it's like Dick Cheney doesn't know how to build a tank. He has to con scientists and other people into using their labor and skill and their resources into doing it. Similar with the banking stuff. I think most of the people on the lower levels believe it's legitimate. When I had my internship at Merrill Lynch, I remember bringing my mom there to visit at one point, but I think what gets missed is how these things on a higher level I do believe that whoever really runs the Fed or makes these silly decisions, or with a straight face points Janet Yellen as the Treasury Secretary, I think they know they're stealing. I think they're very clear about stealing, and it's the same. Anyone who's been around Wall Street, Johnny, you seem like you've been doing this for a while. You know the way these guys think. Hey, if I get my bonus and it blows up after that, hey, who cares? It's the same way politicians think. Hey, if I screw the country, but I can blame it on the next guy, great. And his legacy looks good. Is it disgusting, fraudulent, and perhaps the epitome of the definition of treason? I would agree. But is that what politicians and bankers do? Yes. And where that leads us in silver is that to defend the fraudulent nature of the world's reserve currency, let's think about this. The entire world, actually, that was one of the things I found interesting when I was living in the Netherlands. I met a couple investment guys there, and this was as I was really just beginning to realize how different things are than what were sold. And I found it interesting. This one fella I met, became friends with, and he was working for a fund in the Netherlands, but it was clear that everything that the U.S. Wall Street media says, people were taking as gospel. I don't know. I get it on one hand. On the other hand, certainly it can be frustrating to watch how many times are people going to be fleeced by these same banks. They eat the chickens, they eat the hens, and you're going to put them back to guard the hen house and the chicken house. And you can do that. I choose not to do that. It is what it is. How many politicians have to get caught cheating? How many times do the bankers have to melt down these are the same banks. Yeah. These are the same banks that made up the Fed. Why did they have to do it in secrecy? In fact, I was listening to a podcast yesterday. Sometimes things just click in the right light, where here's the Fed that had to be made in secrecy by the same banks that cheat and steal and blow everything up every couple of years. Then we had the credit bubble. So the Fed comes 1913. Then we have the roaring 20s, influenced by a credit bubble. Then when that implodes, you have FDR and his band of merry gangsters come along and say, hey, well, this money thing is getting out of control. We got to limit this. We can't have the gold standard. So they take it off. And I actually was watching something where they said that some of the gold was sold. I had always thought it was the Treasury, but the Federal Reserve is guarding a large portion of it. So Fed pops out of left field, create an asset bubble. Then people have to sell their gold to the Fed for the safety of the country. Yet here it is, we have Warren Buffett, allegedly the greatest investor in our generation, who says gold is a doorstopper. So what am I missing? Why is the safety of the world at risk? Because there's a rock that people dig out of the ground, and it's not safe for them to hold it, or they're the terrorists, or the speculators, as Richard Nixon 40 years later, once people kept taking the gold because they're not idiots and they see that the U.S. politicians are lying, and that unraveled in the London gold pool. And then we got the COMEX, which is like the London gold pool part 2. And now that's unraveling as we speak. I'm sure whenever that unravels, there will be a new set of bankers in the near future coming up with the London gold pool part 3. I hope they call the next system COMEX part 2, just so it sounds like the sequel to a movie. Make it as silly and ridiculous as it actually is. Although ironically, I think that's what's bringing a lot of this to an end, the way that now you have people making videos and humiliating the silly things that these people lie about. You would think, this would be a matter of finance, yet it's not. And when people are running a Ponzi scheme, it's very difficult to defend against humor when people know you're running a Ponzi scheme and they're willing to stand up to it. And that's what I see happening as we speak.
Okay. We had a few questions, if that's okay with you.
Yeah.
Let us start with the
Hopefully I'll have an answer.
Yeah, with this one first. Because since a while, a lot of new precious metal buyers have entered the market, and maybe they are not also familiar with the precious metal market and all the terms and names we use. So we hear and talk about names like the COMEX, the LBMA, and the CFTC. Also, the name JP Morgan is much discussed. Can you tell our viewers about...
use dirty words, Johnny. Come on, let's keep this a family show.
Yeah.
I mean, vile terms are thrown out there.
Can you tell our viewers about those names or institutes, what they are doing, and why is it so important that they know what exactly they do?
Yeah, because they're running a Ponzi scheme. Mm-hmm. That's the short answer. Paper, silver, they'll sell you out the yin yang. But Johnny, I looked last night. American Eagles cost $13 over something referred to as spot, which is unusual. And I mean, I could probably bore people with the details, but or we could just say they're running a Ponzi scheme, and they've been caught running a Ponzi scheme. They've gotten away with it for an incredibly long time because, as was eloquently depicted in the movie The Big Short, the whole thing, it's like the bully on the playground, except the bully that doesn't really have a backup plan after you realize he's bluffing. Another analogy I like, for anyone who's ever played online poker, you know, you go in that room where it's like the $5 tournaments, in the second hand, everyone's going all in because they don't care. There's no, when you remove, that's the benefit of losing money. You don't, people are a little bit more careful when, oh, if I can go out and bet this, but if I lose, I don't have a house. Then they start thinking about it. But when you have a printing press, or you can just steal from people, you don't care. And in fact, that's what seems to be happening with all these institutions you mentioned ever since February 2nd, where I would still assert that the silver market broke that day. We've been watching the cover up. Yeah. I mean, really, since I'd say you could make the case for February 2nd being the greatest crime in the history of finance. When you really factor in the context, I would say that would make what we've seen then the greatest cover up in the history of financial crime since then. You know, we have, you mentioned LBMA, the guys that reported, by the way, Silver Squeeze was working. We were weeks away from running out of metal. They weren't even counting the physical stuff. Last week they announced, by the way, forgot to add 116 million ounces into our numbers, which just happens to be the same amount, not just the same amount that was added, but the same amount that was added that nobody I know on the planet can explain where that metal came from, especially. So we had the greatest buying spree in the history of silver. Not just, this isn't my opinion. The LBMA showed it, their numbers, they set records. Now, Jeff Curry, I understand people could be confused because you mentioned Goldman Sachs. They pimped out some weasel named Jeff Curry on TV who lied about it while he was even doctoring the prospectus to cover his ass. So people could be confused about that. But these inflows were record setting. Bullion dealers, one after another, at least any of the ones I've talked to, said it was the most calls they had, most silver they ever sold in a single day. Miles Franklin, they said they would have sold a lot more. But imagine if you wake up, Johnny, and you have 1,500 voicemails on your phone. It's like you realize, okay, I can't call all these back today. Yeah. So if been prepared, it would have sold even more. Then you have bankers come out and say, this was just temporary short squeeze. And then in their report that they hope nobody reads, they tell you the truth. So then you have, of course, the CFTC commissioner. This is kind of like supposed to be the policeman of the commodities markets, kind of like the SEC for commodities. Yeah. In fact, exactly like the SEC for commodities, because similar to how the SEC went out of their way to ignore the evidence about Bernie Madoff's Ponzi scheme for years, maybe it's fitting that former CFTC Commissioner Gary Gensler now hopping over to the SEC because they're doing the same exact thing in the metals market. I provided clear evidence. The CFTC has yet to explain how the price of silver falls 10% on the greatest day of silver demand in history. I might add, Johnny, one day after CFTC Commissioner Benham launched an investigation, he said, hey, we're patrolling for fraudulent activity. He said that February 1st. And we find out later that there was a market structure that he voted on with Goldman Sachs and the other banks that set in place to tamp down the thing before things get out of control. Hey, I only worked as a trader on a trading floor where I had to buy, sell, and make a profit. I understand lawyers don't know how to do that. It actually wasn't easy to learn. but I persevered through it. So, but the thing that I guess I didn't learn there is how anyone could make those comments, and that's not describing price fixing by a regulatory agency. He later talks about the features, the margin requirements, hikes, and position limits that acted to control the price and volatility of what could have gotten out of control. So if that's not, I mean, maybe it's not price fixing, but if people bought the most silver in the history of the planet over 3 days, yet the price is lower after that, and this happens the day after the guy launches an investigation, and on the day he launched the investigation, apparently he knew that the market structure was tamping it down. So he was price fixing on the day he launched the investigation. And then you can go on February 23rd, you go to CFTC, February 23rd, type that in YouTube. You can hear this futures market structure that he talks about that tamped down the price. You can hear their meeting, and Goldman Sachs is voting on it. JP Morgan's voting on it. Citadel, Master Criminal, they're voting. Ross, the CFTC, their committee is made up of the banks. So, for years, people wondered, is the CFTC just incompetent, or are they the dirty cop? And then, again, don't anyone take my word for anything on this. Watch the video yourself, where the banks set the policy that was used to price fix the price. It's on video. The guy said it. They voted on it. They wrote about it. They had everybody else lie about it. And I've asked, and the guy had the audacity to talk about the transparency of the agency. I've contacted him. I went to Washington. I have people writing letters, and they can't even. When I ask, can you just tell me, have you looked at the evidence I sent? Because there's a lot of dirty shit happening day after day. Yeah. While you're allegedly investigating, I wrote it up. I explained it. Johnny, it seems like you understand it just fine.
Yes, everybody.
They can't even, when I say, like, have you even looked at what I sent you? They say, well, open investigation. We can't comment. Yet he can go to the Boca Raton Futures Conference, tell the banks. He can sit there, have a meeting that, nobody watches, and have the banks vote on it. That doesn't seem very transparent. It seems quite fraudulent to me. And then, of course, here it is. People emailing. Good luck. Call somebody, know if they can actually get one of these guys to comment, other than to say they can't comment. And we've been waiting 41 years, so I'm done waiting. I can't tell anybody. I won't tell anybody else what to think. But to me, it's a big fraud. And I've tried to get all these institutions that I called a fraud today. I've called them and told them I call them a fraud. I told them why. I said, hey, do you want to see the evidence of why I publicly accuse you of fraud, of why I've submitted evidence about Goldman Sachs to the fraudulent CFTC, why I've submitted evidence about fraudulent JP Morgan to the fraudulent CFTC. And for anyone who's sitting there saying, you're going to get this a lot, Chris, oh, yeah, they're never going to answer you. Yes, I'm very well aware of that. But the advantage is that now these things are on the record. So I can send these to oversight committees, lawyers, Santa Claus. I actually like sending, I wrote this file with a lot of evidence that I had fun sending to all of the executives, all of the silver mining companies. Companies that have lost millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions, in some case, billions of dollars, because they're dedicating their careers to doing a job that's not so easy. And they're getting stolen from by a bunch of frat boy bankers. Although, Johnny, one last thing, and then we could go to the next question. Same reason I left the U.S. a couple years ago, and I'm very shortly will be leaving again. What bothers me, and then I'm not ashamed to be an American, because this government, this isn't an American government. This is a bunch of terrorists. This is a bunch of dirty people. That's not what Americans are. So I apologize to the world on behalf of anyone that confuses American people, most of whom are good, with the American government. But I mean, it is what it is. You see it over and over. I went to Washington. I can't even get someone who wants to see the evidence.
That's
Where's
unbelievable.
Joe Biden's Clean Up Wall Street? Where's Elizabeth Warren Clean Up Wall Street? They don't want to hear it. So fine. If everyone wants to, that's what I don't like, because even if they get caught, oh, well, you know, Joe dropped the silver bar in my. No one ever says, you know what? You're right. You caught me. I cheated. I'm going to take my penalty. They can't even be a man about it. And I think that's disgusting. And that's why, you know, I get passionate about this, because it's especially to take an oath that you're going to set all this up for decades, and to go and live an entire life that these politicians do, where it's, and hey, I mean, I get it. You know, I'm a little naive. I think, you know, I'm like thinking I'm all witty because I figure, I know this has been going on since before I was born. I was reading about Joe Kennedy today, father of JFK, not involved in some stuff that probably they didn't advertise so much. What was his background? Maybe it's always been like that. Maybe it's the mafia uses this term government, so everyone's scared and everyone's afraid. But that's, I think it's time for some of these things to come to light. I'm not a lawyer. I don't have subpoena power, but it's time that people at least understand what's happening and decide for themselves. I don't tell anybody what to do.
Okay. So again, back to the new people in the market. Can you explain in a simple way why they actually do it and how? The price manipulation. Why
they do
and how?
it because they steal a lot of money, and they primarily by selling paper, gold, and silver that they don't own. Mm-hmm. So in the stock market, if you want to short a stock, or I don't even know if they have this anymore, at least back when I was on the floor, if you wanted to short a stock, you have to have what's called a locate or a borrow. Mm-hmm. So you can sell a stock. Let's say you think this stock X is going to go down, so you sell it without owning it. Mm-hmm. And if it goes down, you buy it back cheaper and you make a profit. But let's say you have 100 shares of the stock. You know, you don't want to have like someone selling 1 million shares. I mean, because of course that's going to drive it down. If it's like some insane number. So you're required to borrow the shares. You have to like borrow it from the prime brokerage from someone who owns it. He has the ability to lend it to you or not. I mean, of course that, you know, it doesn't really play out like that. I mean, they would still be hypothecated anyway. But in silver, you don't have that feature. The banks just sell as much paper as they want. So, I mean, you could have Ben Bernanke and Jerome Powell come out today, say, oh my goodness, well, we got to launch this or that, you know, more QE. People would think, geez, well, more money printed to buy gold and silver, but it's traded in paper contracts. Mm-hmm. So let's say someone bids for 5,000 contracts, sold, 10,000 contracts, sold, 100,000 contracts, sold. It's the equivalent of a drunken alcoholic gambler doubling down and then going back to the guy that you probably don't want to piss off, borrowing more, doubling down again, then spitting on the guy you don't want to piss off because you have no control of your emotions. And I think what happened since February, I mean, you have basically the running out of metal, yet you see the volume and you see the way this market is getting pummeled. It almost reminds me of one of those Indiana Jones movies where the Nazis, they're like always just like little rats. They're just like, you know, like scurrying and getting everything, you know, and get the fuck out of there while they still can. And I mean, on one hand, I mean, I suppose it makes sense because these guys have been raping these markets for, you know, we'll stick to silver. I mean, longer than 41 years, but since it hit $50 in 1980. So I don't know, I guess, why would you expect them to stop now? Like, imagine a guy goes in to rob the bank. If he hasn't killed anyone yet, maybe, you know, you feel a little safer. But if he's already like shot 10 people, he has 10 life sentences, you know, at that point, someone like that, you know, the 11th guy, hey, him or that guy, he's going to take him out. So you've seen even, I mean, Goldman keeps showing up, issuing metal, which means they were short. While Jeff Curry's on TV saying you can't have a short fees because of position limits, which Goldman routinely violates, they keep showing up short in these things. Mm-hmm. They don't talk about it on TV, but the things they slip in the middle of the night into the prospectus of SLV. By the way, if you call iShares, they don't tell you about it then either. If you call iShares, you can't even get, I couldn't get the copy of the audit. I've called 3 times, like collective 2 hours, waiting for them to find it. Also, if they could explain how silver goes down 10% on the greatest day of silver demand in history. It's funny. Johnny, actually, let's call together someday so you can hear this. It's because it's really unbelievable. This is JP Morgan and Goldman, the economic savants. I mean, after Warren Buffett, they're like the next greatest ones, yet none of them can answer that simple question. I ask them, I'm like, hey, I get it. Maybe you're the new guy. Can you put me on hold? Find the guy who can. There's got to be someone there. Mm-hmm. If you ask them, is it seem like a conflict of interest that the only one who's checking or adding or subtracting and the metal, not just for SLV, but the other silver trust is JP Morgan, who settled, we don't even know if they paid it, $920 million last year for rigging the markets on hundreds of thousands of occasions. CFTC's not mine. You can also read the book JP Madoff that, digs into some of their other felony track record, although you'd have to update that because they've added on since that was published a few years ago. Mm-hmm. But Helen Chapman talks about how they were Bernie Madoff's sole banker. Keep in mind, JP Morgan, they pulled their money out of the Bernie fund before it collapsed. I'm sure it was just coincidence. Yeah. But a lot of these things add up. And, in the end, there's iShares when you call them and say, is that a conflict of interest that these...
The same guys.
No one else has looked at SLV to verify anything in over a year. And actually, I called, said, well, aren't we due for a new audit? You know what they'd say? When the new audits come for SLV? They say, yes, it is due, but they don't know when it's going to be because of COVID. Oh, okay. What does COVID grow on silver bars now? Can't put anyone in there? Johnny, I'll bet if you called, do you guys do storage at your shop?
Yes.
So if somebody wanted an audit, are they allowed to get an audit? If one of your customers says, I want to see the audit that shows me that I bought these 100 bars, I want proof.
That's no problem.
I want you to prove to me that my 100 bars are there. They're not getting mixed up with anybody else. If somebody says that, what do you say?
Come and see.
Okay, why can't SLV do that? What COVID eats their bars but not yours? How long is the COVID excuse gonna? When I went to Washington, I actually went by the U.S. Treasury. Yeah. There's a Secret Service woman standing outside there, and I'm joking. I'm like, "Hey, where's Janet? I want to say hi. I'm a big fan." She's like, "Who?" I'm like, I think she thought I was talking about Janet Jackson, but I was like, "No, Janet Yellen. I heard she works here," and then she says, "No, there's no one in the building because of COVID," which is interesting. Where's Janet Yellen going every day? Yeah. And if everyone's getting vaccines, but okay, the U.S. Mint shut down because of COVID. They can't do an audit because of COVID. They can't find the bars because of COVID. They can't, EFP markets breaking up because of COVID. I saw in the LVMA report, they actually used the excuse that they couldn't get bars. It was either New York to London or London to New York because of COVID and because the freight ship would have taken like a week or two. Oh, okay. So rather than taking a week or two, let's just shut down the trade. That's the better solution because of COVID. I'm waiting. Maybe the dog ate iShares' homework, and then they went to baseball practice afterwards, lost it in the sunlight. Can we get? But that's the thing, Johnny. Like I said before, there's no honor. That's the advantage for anyone who's saying, all right, yeah, I get all this stuff, but where does that leave me? Talk about your all-time cowards. They get caught. Always this, always that. No integrity, not even a shred of manhood to say like, all right, here it is. I'll put my name and face. I said this. I'll explain it. I don't know when you sent over questions. Did I say, oh no, you can't ask this one, or you can't ask this one, or you can't ask that one? Actually, I said, you can ask whatever you want. You don't need to send me a list of questions, right?
Yeah, that's right.
You can ask me anything now. I'm not. Yeah. Well, why is it all these lawyers and bankers, they can't answer shit?
That's right. Mm-hmm.
They don't have a problem asking for your money. But here's an interesting thing. When I called February 5th, that was the week after iShares claimed they added 120 million ounces. I said that was impossible. I don't know anybody else who knows that was possible. even if the price hadn't fallen, let alone if it fell 10%, they can't find the audit, which means they sold 120 million shares in 3 days. I'm assuming nobody else asked for the audit. I've called 3 times now. I challenge you or any of your listeners to get it.
That's unbelievable.
At one point, the guy on the phone, he's saying, he like directs me to like a paragraph in the 10K where it mentions PricewaterhouseCoopers something. There's like a paragraph. The word audit is in it, but he's like, is that what you're looking for? I'm like, no, I was looking for the audit, not a paragraph that mentions the word audit. And if you go to the prospectus and search for audit, you find out a lot about the audit fees.
Ah, the fees.
Not so much. I haven't been able to get it yet. So I'm assuming that means they sold all those shares and nobody asked for it. But if anybody wants to know of why SLV is incredibly dangerous, these are some of the reasons why, and I can go for days. So just let me know.
Yeah. Now, okay. Now with the awareness of all this, and silver is currently receiving from Wall Street Silver Group the silver squeeze movements now that worldwide arise, the growing physical demand from the industry, and I talk about only physical now. I think something must happen sooner than later. How do you see this evolve?
I would say the biggest shock in my life is that this is even still going on today.
Yeah.
I mean, that's impressive. I will admit that the banks have done a good job of lying and conning people for an incredibly long time. So I will give the devil its due. Credit in there. With that said, hey, I've learned it can go on longer than I think, but I mean, it's almost hard. Like, I don't know what other sign you could get that it's close to ending. I mean, you see it's like a boxing match where body blow after another. I mean, all right, LBMA writes the report. The CFTC guy gets caught lying. The LBMA makes the numbers are wrong. You still see the price going down. You look at the chart and the volume. I guess I would suggest to people that in a manipulated market, I don't think what happens today has any effect on what could happen tomorrow or next week. Ponzi schemes don't implode gently. Mm-hmm. And there's a Ponzi scheme in the paper silver market or the paper dollar market, of which physical silver is the inverse of that. Mm-hmm. So I don't know when that gets resolved. I think I don't have any plans to stop bringing it up. In fact, I have a lot of great plans to bring it up. In fact, Johnny, what do you think would happen if I wrote down just some of this factual information that I've found? It's a concise little one sheet, and had someone on my staff contact all the institutional owners of SLV. Mm-hmm. Do you own SLV shares now?
No.
Or would you buy SLV shares at this point?
SLV, no.
So let me ask you this. Based on, what we've talked about today, and I don't know, maybe I have more evidence of red flags at the very least. If someone read that file that I sent to Commissioner Benham, laying out all the questions, if they were aware of that, and then they were managing money on behalf of clients, do you think they would be legally liable if they said nothing and left their clients invested in SLV after they had read the risks? Do you think that could leave a fund manager legally liable in a court of law if he left his clients' money in there? Because it would be like the equivalent of like if you read the report about Bernie Madoff that he was running a Ponzi scheme, mm-hmm. and you just kept profiting off of it. Mm-hmm.
I know a lot of money is leaving SLV at this moment. A lot of.
Yeah, actually, if you can enable screen share for a moment, I'll actually show you something that I just noticed recently that is quite interesting. Now, I don't know that I'd be using the Deutsche Bank ETF, especially given their track record, but you see metal is coming in and out. The 4-week change is only 2 million ounces less, but beneath the surface, you see some interesting dynamics going on. It's not just everyone selling silver. They're reallocating where it's at. And perhaps maybe a good thought to leave people with is that, yes, it's true. And you hear people say, hey, the COMEX, most of the contracts are rolled over every month. So when you hear people saying the COMEX is going to fail because there's not enough metal, well, most likely they'll roll it over. And usually that is the case. I'm not disputing that. Yet I've been reading this book called Silver Bulls by an incredible author named Paul Sarnoff. This book was written in 1980, and he talks about the same dynamic, how typically 97 to 99% of the contracts were rolled over, except for in October of 1979. It didn't happen that time. And that's kind of how Ponzi schemes go. It stays in line for a long time, but once it breaks, watch out, and we'll see how long these guys. I mean, it's a crime scene now. It's not a financial market. It's a crime scene, but you see the signs. Not only are these guys getting caught, but again, here, this is the sign that I don't expect the government's going to turn itself in, but here's the sign that the market is catching them, which is what I always thought would ultimately end this, and I still believe that.
Okay, can I go to our next question?
Absolutely, my friend.
I read of you say on your website that we are on the beginning of a bigger market crash than 2008. People who want to protect their money, in what should they invest now? Cash, silver, gold, real estate, bonds, crypto, or a spread in this? And why? What would you do?
They should invest in what's ever best for them, right?
Eh?
Isn't that the... I will preface the answer. I'm not a licensed financial advisor, thank God. So I have a pretty good track record. I think it's been a couple of years since I've actually told somebody else what they should do. That's a recipe for disaster. So I share what I do, what I'm looking at, why I do that. Again, everybody's situation is different. If one guy has $3 million, maybe you're going to buy more silver than, some guy who's, in debt. Do you want to lever up to buy silver? To be clear, if you need a source of income over the next month or the next quarter, precious metals are not the way to go.
No.
So I would say that if you're able to, sit there and just keep buying silver each month, and whether it's next week, next year, or I don't know, could people be okay? Let's say you just kept buying silver for the next 20 years at $25, and then it went up, and your kids benefited from it. If you can be okay with that, if you be the guy who has patience, market where everybody runs around like they're a crack junkie. That's quarter. I need some earnings. I need some. Oh, they didn't hit it. It's like Jesus. You could. I'll bet. In fact, I might end up doing this. Start a hedge fund. Just taking the opposite of what. Just like read the headlines. Notice how you feel. Oh, trade war on. Oh, I'm a little nervous there. Okay. When you notice that, do the opposite of whatever that feeling is that these headlines are designed to induce you to feel. Think about trade war on, trade war off. Right, it actually happened, but price spiked. People got stopped out either way. It's a pumping. That's what Wall Street does. That's what last year. That's what they'll do next year. That's what they did 100 years ago. It's the only play they have. And when people realize that, it's like having a decoder ring, because you can quickly start understanding any of these things. And that's why, I don't know, maybe the whole let's go work on a trading floor and give stock tips. Maybe that's like the, at least for me, maybe it was like an immature thing of my 20s where hopefully one day we grow up and say, well, maybe there's more to life than, I don't know, at least for me, I was like, this option thing is kind of cool, but let's say, I became the greatest option trader in the world. Like, I don't know, is there something else I can contribute on the planet? And I think the best part is that people don't have to become a hedge fund genius or look at silver as much as you and I do. I mean, I do the show because I think there's some things that are illegal and fraudulent that are happening, and I'm not okay with that. But I mean, it's more, and it's fascinating. But for me, like the part about, especially once I started seeing it that way, hey, you know, I get it. I've had the days where, you know, you have your trade on and the price goes down and you're frustrated and, you know, screaming and, oh, these guys did this and that. I think the best thing in my entire financial career, somewhere last year, I was able to stop caring about that. All right. I mean, it was a little challenging as I was getting my business together, but now I'm very fortunate. Things are going well. That money coming in. All right. Well, I'll keep buying it lower. Price is going to go at some point. It'll be exciting when it is. But Johnny, maybe like anything else in life, our mindset is far more important. Think about silver investors. You know, we get very passionate and emotional about it. I don't know. I would like to think if I was the spot that, all right, they're going to hammer the price 100%, it's going to get hammered lower in the next hour. Well, then I for a short-term trade, yeah. You know, that's, maybe it's not this asset going, maybe all these markets, it's really how we interact with it. If we can understand, get away from what we think is fair or what we thought we were sold or what should be, and start realizing, hey, I don't think it's great that the Fed's printing money, but I don't know, in hindsight, sometimes I think, maybe I should have just gotten long a bunch of Japanese assets in 2013 when Shinzo Abe won, when he promised a hyperinflation campaign, which he delivered. So taking that, what we want or what is fair, it has as a human, it has its rightful place. But when we start saying, all right, here's what is, and you take, especially when you're trading, if you can take the emotion out of it, and actually here's a little trick I found helpful. Make your plan at night before you go to sleep. If you have a trade on, you're not sure what to do, and there's some big event the next day, say, all right, even if you don't have to have it exact, but all right, if X happens, I'm going to respond like this. If Y happens, I'm going to respond like that. You don't have to lock yourself into it, but even that process of thinking about it when you're calm, then, you know, if you wake up the next morning, the price in your face, you're like, oh my God, I can't believe how much my P&L is down. You want to be careful because that's why they call it a psyop. And that's how Wall Street works. They set expectations. They don't come beat you over the head with a gun. I think they want you to fear that. But if you can scare someone out of their money, that's a lot less expensive. And that's exactly what they do. That's the only thing they've ever done. That's the only play. And if, Johnny, hopefully this is coming across clearly, ask any questions. If not, because when you can master that part, then silver goes up, silver goes down. If you know, to me, I don't see any way that the U.S. Ponzi scheme can be undone. If you accept that it's a Ponzi scheme and you can see it clearly, it's great. I get money. All right, I'll buy some silver. Here, got these silver coins. You know what the price of this is? Actually, I heard a big whopper the other day. Someone was telling about the price of gold. It's going here, it's going up, it's going left, it's going right. I don't know. I'll bet an ounce of gold always costs an ounce of gold. That's how much it's worth. Maybe it's the fraudulent dollar whose price is getting rigged up and down, left ways and sideways. I know this sounds like small semantics, yet I don't know, it's like at a poker table. You know, why is one guy, two people there? Why does one guy always win, the other guy always loses? My background of training and trading, and then the things I've thought about since then. Here's the best part. This isn't just trading. Apply this mindset to anything in life. Or even better yet, just look at people who are successful in any area of life, and you find I've found very similar characteristics. Work in trading, work in being a good parent, work in anything. And hopefully that's what is able to be passed along clearly today. You don't have to live in fear. Please, by all means, don't take anything to believe it just because I say it. Think about if it makes sense to you. Double check these things. that's why I go out of my way to explain things in the way that I do, so that it's not coming down to a matter of opinion. All the guys who were saying gold and silver, they saw the subprime bubble in advance. All the banks, you had Bernanke saying it was contained as it was imploding.
Mm-hmm.
You can catch these guys lying if you look. They want you to trust them. I don't think they're trustworthy. So it's up to anyone how they want to respond to that. But I think when you can, and I get it, it's almost mind-boggling that the thing could be this distorted. I think that's the hard part to believe. The numbers are simple enough.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But if you can take that step back, sometimes the more you do something desensitizes it. So it's like, all right, then, if today you're hearing something that's like, whoa, no, what this guy's saying, it couldn't be that wacky. Well, you come back and listen to it a week later. Or go check one or two things. Look at the debt clock. Read some of the evidence. You don't have to master it today, but it's there. It's there if you want to find it, and I guess I know that can be a bit heavy mentally at times, but I would say, at least from my experience, the payoff is worth it, because I don't know if I've ever had a peace of mind where it's incredible. I'm earning a good living from doing something I genuinely love. I mean, if you gave me like $10 million, I'm still going to wake up and make videos joking about Goldman Sachs, because and that's a formula. If everything we're saying is boring, don't invest in gold and silver. Find whatever. I mean, if somebody knows computers and what a semiconductor is, and like Jim Rogers, I think is right, is invest in what you know. Do things you're passionate about. I mean, if you're bored to tears listening to this, then don't, go to the Silver Channel. But if this is interesting, you're like, wow, I'd love to study this more. Or what? That's what gets through the challenging parts. And so I think the payoff for those who are able to handle these things, I think they're going to happen whether we handle them or not. It's kind of like some people were ready to accept that the housing market was a bubble. You saw the people in The Big Short. Mm-hmm. It's the same thing. And a lot of other people, until it happened, they didn't want to hear it. And that's kind of human nature in my experience of how these things go. And that's why when I started getting into this, I imagine, well, maybe there's some chance the regulators do something, but probably it'll go until the market pops. How long it'll take, we'll see. Now it's kind of fun to at least help accelerate that process, not in any nefarious way, but just by pointing out the truth and watching these guys disappear when you point it out and have nothing to say, and speaking loudly enough. And so I don't need a courtroom. Here, there's the sign that it's happening. Because people, if you're looking for, it's happening because the price is moving up, that's the metric that is distorted. So the warning signal, it's like the canaries are dropping in the coal mine. But if we're looking for the wrong warning signal, Wall Street has broken the signal. Normally, gold and silver soar. That's what makes people say, oh my God, something's happening with the dollar.
Yes, that's true.
They've rigged that, but here's the forensic evidence underneath the surface that if people see this, obviously JP Morgan, they don't tell you about this. Goldman Sachs doesn't tell you about this. CFTC doesn't tell you about this. Doesn't mean it's not happening. All this stuff is there for people who want to see it, and
spread the word. Huh? And then my last question, and maybe the hardest: how do you see gold and silver evolving from this year for the next 10 years? And do you dare to stick numbers on it?
I think 10 years from now, the price of silver will be a number that if I said out loud now, everyone would giggle at me.
No, but
although here's a way to think about it. If Bitcoin was $500 in 2016 and it's like 40, or it was up to 60, I guess it's 40. So even at 45,000, excuse me, that means it would be a 90 bagger. And silver is not only half of its 2011 high, it's half of its 1980 high. So let's just say for a second, okay, let's say it matched that 90 bagger. So that would, let's see, what's today's price? I guess we'll call it 28 times 90. That would be $2,520 silver price, which sounds big, and I think that is. Hopefully I would have some options on when that happens, but let's check the debt clock. Because they have a metric on there. This measures how much money is being printed. This is how much is being mined. Here, dollar to silver ratio is now 4,785 per ounce. Johnny, you said that you give your customers the ability to audit or check their metals. I don't know why Fort Knox can't after like 50 years. So, and then there's Dr. Mark Skidmore, who's found 145 trillion of missing dollars. So if it's just a fraction, hey, when the Fed came along, dollar was backed by gold. It was just a measure of it. Mm-hmm. But here's what, if it was so dangerous, we had to sell gold to that. Yet Ben Bernanke a couple of years ago said he didn't understand gold and he doesn't know anybody that does either. That's unusual. It seems like the other guys at the Fed understood it enough that it was such a concern. Did Bernanke, I know he was a great, didn't he brag about how he's a great historian of the Great Depression? Yet he doesn't know that the Fed said for national security they had to sell the gold? Does that make him a fraudulent liar or an idiot or both?
At least one of the two.
So, hey, I guess maybe that's a good spot to leave it. It's up to people to decide. If what I'm saying makes sense, by all means, double check it. Mm-hmm. If what Bernanke says makes sense, what Goldman Sachs says makes sense, if the CFTC talks about tamping it down, transparency, then they won't answer any of the questions if that makes sense. And Johnny, I'll give you the link so that if people want to read the file of evidence that I sent directly to the commissioner saying, here are the questions for you, sir. It's not just me. I don't know why your constituents are asking me to explain your actions.
I already sent the letter from you in our group.
Great. And we can put it in, if you want to put it in the description so people can have access.
Yes.
Anybody, you're welcome to take that letter, hand it to your lawyer, make videos out of it. Any way that you can use that. I'm not trying to copyright it. I don't care. I don't need credit. I just want people to have a fair playing field. It's the only thing I care about in it.
We do that. So, Chris, thank you so much to come in our show. I hope all our viewers become also a member of your YouTube channel, where you post almost every day interesting videos. If they are interested in silver or want to do this, go to the website www.arcadiaeconomics.com and order the book, The Big Silver Short, a must read. You can find the channel of Chris via YouTube. Type in Arcadia Economics and you will find it. And Chris, again, I appreciate your time and we hope to see you again in the future and keep up the good work.
Well, thank you so much, Johnny. I really appreciate that there's people like you around the globe who care enough. It's not always the easy path in life, but obviously I think it's important. And by the way, I know it's been a challenging couple of years, so we are having Silverfest 2 this Halloween season in Mexico. So if everyone's like tired of the Keynesians around them and you want to come celebrate, God only knows what the price of silver will be then. But Johnny, maybe you'll be able to make it there. I'd love to meet you in person. And thank you again for having me on the show. It's a pleasure to meet you and look forward to following this story going forward with you. Good times are coming, my friend. We're very close, I believe.
Okay, thank you very much. Volg ons YouTube-kanaal voor aankomende interviews met meer experten van over heel de wereld. Word ook lid van onze besloten Facebookgroep Silver Squeeze, goud en zilver, waarom, wanneer, hoe en waar. Zo blijft u op de hoogte van alle nieuwe updates over de markt. Wilt u meer info of advies over het aankopen van fysiek goud of zilver? Ga dan naar onze website www.europeesegoudstandaard.be. Bedankt voor het kijken en tot een volgende video.